Chapter 13, Sun Heat. I knew something was wrong. All evening, Tayul's face was like a rock, cold, hard, and grayed. Later, I saw him and Uncle talking in the garden. I watched as Uncle shook his head and put his arm around Tayul's shoulder. I could tell that Uncle was trying to comfort him, but of course, nobody told me anything. In the morning, I left the house and walked along, waiting for the moment when Tayul would zoom by me on his bicycle, as he always did. I was nearly halfway to school when I finally turned around, wondering where he was. He usually passed me along before this point. I saw him a few blocks behind me walking. The bicycle could have been broken, but I knew at once this wasn't had happened. I remembered his face from the night before. His bike had broken lots of times. He'd never look as sad as he did now. And he went on looking like that for days afterwards. No, not sad. That isn't quite right. Sad and angry, mixed up together. Angry at Abjuli for some reason. Tayul seemed to be stiffened whenever Abjuli came into the room. If Abjuli spoke to him, he'd answer with a grunt or mumbled something. I could hardly believe Tayul was being so disrespectful. Whenever they were in a room together, things were really uncomfortable, like a blanket of bad feeling all over us. As if this weren't enough, life at home seemed even grayer and sadder because Uncle wasn't around much. He was working longer and longer hours in his shop. There were nights when he didn't come home at all. Amoni worried about his health. She feared he wasn't eating or sleeping enough. Sometimes she sent me or Tayul with some supper for Uncle. More and more often, when I reached the shop, I'd find the door closed. I'd call out as I pushed open the door. Uncle would come hurrying out of the back room. He always greeted me cheerfully and made a joke about how I'd saved his life by bringing food. And then he'd walk me out and look up and down the street before he closed the door behind me. I was curious about the way he scanned the street. He'd done the same when I came by with Junction. Time after time, I almost said something to Tayul, but he'd have to have seen it too, and he hadn't said anything. One evening in early summer, Amoni sent me out with Uncle's supper. As I left her house, I saw more out of the corner of my eye that startled me. Someone was standing in the long shadow of the wall of the house next door. It was Tomo. Tomo, what are you doing hiding there? You nearly frightened me to death. Hello, he said, but he didn't step out of the shadow. He leaned forward a little and looked quickly up and down the lane. Then he jerked his head, beckoning at me to join him. I was pleased to see him, but the way he was acting made me look around nervously as I walked towards him. We were at different schools now, so it'd been a while since we'd last met. I noticed how much he'd grown. We'd always been close to the same height, but now he was nearly a head taller than me. I was just passing, he said carefully, and I thought I'd stop by to see if you were around. I've been thinking about something. His eyes flickered to my face and then down to the ground. He was definitely uncomfortable. Thinking about what? I asked him as gently as I could. Aimlessly, he kicked a stone at his feet. Then he squatted down on his haunches and picked it up. He examined it carefully for a moment, as if he might hold a secret. Suddenly, his face seemed to brighten. He stood up again and held the stone to me. Do you remember when we used to collect stones like this to build our cities? I smiled. Of course I remember. We built lots of cities, some really good ones. Remember the stadium? Yes, I've been thinking about those days, Tomo said, still speaking slowly, and about the little things your uncles made us do. Do you know what happened to them? Uncle had often stopped to admire the cities. Once he gave me a present, several tiny signs with real printing on them. He made them in his shop. They said things like grocery store and railway station. I was so proud when I brought them to show Tomo. They made our city look so much more real. Another time, Uncle made a lot of little things out of wire. Lamp posts and gates for outside the houses, tables for inside, even a tiny wire bicycle. We were delighted. No, I frowned. What happened to what? The little signs or the wire things? I suppose they all got lost, I'm not sure. But I know I don't have them at home anymore. He said. I wish I knew. It's too bad he made some really nice things. An odd feeling was growing inside me, in my throat, in my stomach, at the back of my neck. The way Tomo was looking at me, talking so seriously about a few silly childish toys as if he were saying one thing while thinking another. He took a step toward the lane. I have to go now. I just wanted to say I always thought it was a shame that we didn't keep those things safe somehow. It was so nice of your uncle. I thought of it especially today. His voice trailed off. He glanced up and down the lane again and then looked at me one last time as if he were about to say something more. Instead, he handed me the stone, touched his cap, and hurried away. I stood still for a moment, saying one thing but thinking another. I sensed that Tomo had wanted to tell me something that he couldn't say openly. I looked at the stone that he'd given me, the houses and shops we'd build out of stones, like this one, the little things inside them that Uncle had for us. Uncle. He mentioned Uncle a couple times. A shame, your uncle, not safe, especially today. I raised my head in a moment of stunned realization. Tomo had brought me a warning. Something bad was going to happen to Uncle. I dropped the lunchbox that held Uncle's dinner and began to run. Only a few blocks to Uncle's shop, and he never seemed so long. I couldn't go as fast as I wanted to. I had to keep my eye out for military guards who would surely question me if they saw me running in a panic. I stayed close to the buildings, hurrying along and pausing before I turned a corner. I thought perhaps maybe I should go home first to talk to Tayul, but my heart was pounding and my thoughts were pounding, and I couldn't seem to stop my feet. As I neared the center of town, where there were more guards, I slowed down and tried to walk casually, thinking the whole time. As if I went home and told Tayul, what would I do? He'd go warn Uncle, surely. He might even be angry at me for wasting time. I thought of it especially today, Tomo had said. Whatever it was, it might happen at any minute now. The sooner the better to tell Uncle. This must be what Abjui had been afraid of what he tried to warn Uncle about. Or else Tayul might say it was nothing, and we should just wait and see, that I'd imagined everything, that Tomo had just been chatting about nothing. Tayul might think I was silly for getting so excited, but he hadn't been there. He hadn't seen Tomo's uneasy face or heard the worry in his voice. I knew I was right. I knew Tomo. He was telling me more than he said. I could feel it. I quickened my steps again. Now I could see the shop. The door was closed, and I ran the half block and pushed the door open. There was no one in the shop itself, but I heard the low voices coming from the back room. Uncle, I called shakily. Uncle came out with the usual cheerful expression on his face, though I could see from the dark smudges under his eyes he was very tired. Son, he said, where's my supper? Did you eat it on the way here? I was too frightened to respond to his little joke. Uncle, please, you must leave here quickly. Something bad. I don't know when. A light in Uncle's eyes faded at once. He came toward me and put his arm around me. Son, calm yourself. What's the matter? Shh. I took a deep breath, swallowed hard, and began again. Uncle, Tomo came to see me just now. He said something bad's going to happen to you. He didn't say exactly when or what it was, but I'm very worried. I could tell it. And it will be soon, Uncle. Please, what is it? What was Tomo talking about? Uncle didn't look surprised. He didn't even question me. Wait here, he said, and he went to the back room. He spoke to someone. I could hear another voice answer him, but I couldn't make out the words. There was sudden flurry of activity, the sound of papers being rustled. I heard the front door rattle, and the draft from another person left the back door. Uncle returned and came out from behind the counter. He pulled me close to him and gave me a quick hug. I'm not going home tonight, son. I won't be home again for a long time. How long, I'm not sure. I can't answer your questions right now. You must hurry home. He paused for a moment. Tell Tayul. I said that he can tell you what he knows. Something bad was to happen. Uncle had been expecting it. Not from me, maybe. Not in this way, but he was ready. He knew it was happening, even if I didn't, and he had a plan to go somewhere.